This is a BBC podcast. You can get all our podcasts and our terms of use at bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
Hello, welcome to World Football on BBC World Service. I'm Alan Green. On this week's programme, we hear about the plight of some players in Eastern Europe whose treatment by their clubs leaves them open to offers from match fixers.
The players who are having a family and a mortgage, the players who are suffering because they do not receive their salary, are more interested in match fixing than players who are receiving their salary on time.
But first, the General Secretary of the Worldwide Footballers Union, FIFPRO, has told the programme that the zero-tolerance approach favoured by UEFA and FIFA is not going to solve match fixing. Theo van Zegelen says players are victims when it comes to fixing games, and more needs to be done to make sure that clubs and federations follow the rules in honouring contracts. After a survey of thousands of players, the union has just published what it calls its Black Book. It reveals the true scale of match fixing, racism and violence in the region. The research found a clear link between non-payment of players' salaries and match fixing. 41.1% of players have not had their salary paid on time, of which more than half were approached to consider fixing a match. In a moment we'll hear from a player who's in dispute with two clubs in Ukraine. But first, Theo van Zegelen on how the Black Book came about.
In 2004-2005, we discovered that there was a big problem in East Europe about the treatment with players. And we tried to contact the federations of these countries and to start a dialogue with them to improve the situation. But unfortunately, we have visited the countries, but we couldn't make a lot of progress. And then we decided a couple of years ago to organize the players. We started with the players from the national teams, and we built up new players' unions in East Europe. And then we had a conference in July 2010. We invited all these unions, interviewed them and asked them what was the situation. And that was for FIFPRO the reason to produce this Black Book, because we were shocked by the stories of the players.
What do you think the most important things are that you find out?
The most important things are, of course, that contracts in these countries are not respected at all. More than 50% of the players will not receive their salary on time, or they will not receive their salary at all. This is something we really cannot accept. Another thing we found out is that there is a relationship between players not paid and match fixing. It is for us obvious that players who are having a family and a mortgage, that players who are suffering because they do not receive their salary, are more interested in match fixing than players who are receiving their salary on time. And that is, of course, a very important conclusion, which we have to take into account when we are starting the fight against match fixing.
One player who claims he's owed money by clubs is the 30-year-old Nigerian defender Haris Numoko, who's been playing in Ukraine for the last 10 years. He's been telling me his story.
Since 2007, December, it has been something else, because I came here to look for a job or to work and make money for myself and my family. But for some time now, it has been the other way around because of the type of people that are managing football here in the Ukraine. How can somebody work and does not receive what he works for? The last club I played, during the course of training, I had an injury. Because of the injury, they had to cancel my contract without no compensation. This is unhuman. This is absolutely unhuman. Without compensation, I had this injury during the course of training. I had to treat myself all by myself. I spent a lot. I had to travel to Italy for rehabilitation. After the operation I did here was not a success, The Premier League, they are not contributing to this fact at all, because whenever you bring a case to them, they are just sitting a bunch of lawyers of the clubs that are sitting there. So definitely every decision is to the favor of the clubs. The final verdicts are not favorable to the players. I told them anyway, I'm going to fight the length. I'm going to take the case to FIFA or UEFA. If they tell me there it's my fault, then I know it's my fault. But here, I'm not going to stop on this. I'm not going to relent in my efforts.
You don't have a club at the moment. How are you managing to support yourself financially, Harrison?
Yeah, it's so difficult, but I just thank God. God has been my everything. He's going to see me through. All these things, it's just part of life. It's trials and temptation, because I know someday they're going going to come to an end.
Players who find themselves in your situation must be vulnerable to match fixers who can offer large amounts of money. Have you ever been approached, Harrison, by a match fixer?
No, because as for me, being brought up in a Christian family, what is not mine, I don't take. So I've not been approached because they know I'm not going to do that.
So, Harrison Omoko says he hasn't had any approaches to fix matches. But what of those who have and who have gone through with it? Should they be punished if they've done it because of financial desperation? A question for FIFPRO General Secretary Theo van Ziegelen.
Of course, we will not promote in any way match fixing, but what we conclude is that players are victims. And we are totally against the strategy of UEFA and FIFA. With the zero tolerance strategy, you will not fight and solve the problem of match fixing. Players are victims of the system, and that's the reason why we think that this has to be taken into account. But that does not, of course, mean that we are, even in these circumstances, can accept that they are involved in match fixing.
I see that in Russia, over 40% of players say they're aware of match fixing, while across the board, we have a situation in which 1 in 10 players have been racially abused. How has this been allowed to happen?
Even for me, and I'm doing my job already for a long time, I was shocked when I heard these figures. We think that, especially when we talk about match fixing, we have a lot of concerns. We underestimate in the football family the danger of match fixing. And we have also examples, not only in Asia, but also in South America and Africa. Football is a global sport, and that means that this is a global problem. And we have started now this investigation in East European countries, but we are sure that not only in East Europe, but also in West Europe, for instance, match fixing is a real problem.
The findings are clearly very, very shocking. But what can FIFPRO do about them other than highlight what's happening?
Of course, to highlight the problems is one thing, to solve them is another one. I think that in football, we have altogether the clubs, the leagues, but also the federations and the governing bodies. We all have to face the fact that if we altogether are not coming with a package of measures to prevent these kinds of treatment of players, then we are playing with the future of professional football. There is only one solution, and that is that as soon as possible, we are going to work in the nearer future with labor contracts, with one contract, that we have on national level licensing systems, that we control associations who are not following the regulations. And most of the important thing is that there is also a control of enforcement of decisions, because if we have in fact already a lot of rules in football, but nobody is respecting the rules. And if that will not happen, then it's not only a problem for the players, but it's a problem for everybody, because then I'm afraid that professional football, especially in the countries which are mentioned in our report, will not have any future anymore.
That was the General Secretary of FIFPRO, Theo van Ziegelen. That's all for this week. Remember, if you want to download World Football, just go to our website. That's bbcworldservice.com/sport. Follow the links to the World Football page. And you can also follow us on Twitter at WS World Football. Do join us again at the same time next week. Until then, always remember, World Service, World Football.